We're still in our World War II series, and don't forget we've ditched the 19 part of the date. So today's date is April 1945, or 445, the death of Mussolini and the death of Hitler. Let's start with Mussolini. As the creator of fascism, Mussolini had inspired multiple right-wing parties to take over nations across Europe. In 1940, he had joined Germany in its war against the Allies, hoping to build an Italian empire like ancient Rome. By 1943, however, he had been disposed, rescued, and then set up as leader of a German puppet state in northern Italy. The puppet state was threatened in the south by the Allies and Italian partisans in the north. As the war drew to a close, a partisan uprising broke apart the puppet state, and Mussolini fled Milan, heading towards the Swiss border. He and his mistress Claretta were captured on the 27th of April in the village of Dongo. The accepted chain of events is that he and Claretta were summarily executed by Walter Adizio on the 28th. Both bodies were displayed in Milan and hung from a girder outside a service station to be mocked and abused. He was then buried, and in 1946 dug up by fascists. The body was recovered by the government, who held it for 11 years in secret, and then finally interned it in the family crypt. The first of the Axis leaders, and the man who created fascism that still torments nations to this day, was dead. Now let's talk about Hitler's final days. After 12 years in power, which had seen Germany rise to global superpower status, and he had conquered a sizable portion of Europe, Hitler spent his final days in the Führer bunker in central Berlin, where he had been since January 1945. By April, the Allies had crossed the Rhine and were seizing the Ruhr. The Soviets were surrounding Berlin. Hitler ordered a counterattack against the Soviets around the city. This order was disobeyed. This is when the dictator finally realized all was lost. On the 29th, he learned of Mussolini's death and the public display of his body, a fate Hitler wanted to avoid. After hearing that any remaining German forces could not give relief to Berlin, on the 30th, Hitler said his goodbyes to his staff. He had one final meeting where he approved an attempted breakout by Berlin forces. After having lunch, he went to his private study at 2:30 p.m, and there he and Eva Braun, his wife of only 40 hours, committed suicide. Both bodies were burned with petrol in the garden behind the Reich Chancellery. When his death was announced, Karl Donitz became head of what remained of the regime. Many high-ranking members of the Nazi Party killed themselves, as did some generals. After starting a war that had lasted 5 years and resulted in the deaths of tens of millions, began a holocaust of the Jewish people and shifted the balance of power in the world. The Reich that was to last 1,000 years had ended. Remember this date, let's use some very morbid imagery. However, we are dealing with two of history's greatest monsters, so I'm sure we'll get over it. First, the fall will be made out of Mussolini. As he swings by the legs while hanging from the service station, the rope bounces him up and down kind of like a bungee cord, and as it goes up and down, the rope snakes into the shape of a 4. Meanwhile, for the 45, Hitler's body is chucked into a ditch, petrol sprinkled on it, and when it's set alight, the demons, who we can only assume were inhabiting Hitler's body at his request, escape and briefly form in the air the 4 and 5. April 1945, the death of Mussolini and Hitler. Thanks for watching.